non mutate in crivoli le rose dell'amor, a piedi miei resistere non voglia il vostro corra, no.
And welcome to Tuesday Conversation with Friends. And today we have a very special friend who is an amazing baritone. And his name is Martin Eng. And Martin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Martin Eng, and I am a baritone from Singapore. I was trained as a lawyer, but I went subsequently to Italy to study opera, and I started my career in Italy. And after a few years of touring and froing between Asia and Italy, I finally moved back to Singapore in 2017, and I have been singing opera in most parts of Asia, like Taiwan, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore. I also teach. I am a lecturer of vocal studies at the Nanyang Academy of Fine Arts of Singapore, and I'm also a producer. I have recently founded an opera society called Lyrical Art, and in March 2022, we will be producing our first full-scale opera by Rossini, the one-act opera L'Inganno Felice. And right now I am in Taichung in quarantine, as you can see the back in my hotel room, because 22nd, 24th, and 26th of December, I will be singing the role of Don Bartolo in Rossini's Barber of Seville at the National Taichung Theatre.
How wonderful. You know, there are so many facets to who you are. And love to get to know some of those. And we'd love to get to know all of those facets, but of course, time probably doesn't allow. Now, let's start from the very beginning. Like people saying the sound of music, right? Let's start from the very beginning. Yes. And how did you discover your passion for opera, for music? And because obviously you took a detour. And did you
Yeah.
discover this love before or after you pursued law? And how did you come to your decision to take a risk, really, and go to a country where you didn't speak the language and to pursue a career that you were not sure of where it was going to take you?
Okay, wow, that's a big question, or there's a whole series of questions. I think I think first of all, the interest actually started with from young. In my teenage years, I chanced upon opera. There was CD shops like Tower Records, HMV. So after school, I used to go to the CD shops and I would spend hours listening to music. And I came across this Viennese operetta CD, and what struck me most was the aria sung by Rosalind in Die Fledermaus, the song about the
Chadash.
Heimat.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
and that
Yes.
was like totally wowed me. As I was amazed by how the human voice could actually create such a vibration in me, and such and was able to create such, an impact on me. So I went through university, I went through the army, and the interest for opera like sort of grew stronger and stronger. In my first years of university, in law school, I studied voice with a lady, actually one of the most prolific voice teachers in Singapore. And so I graduated from law school and I started practicing as a lawyer. Just a few months into practicing, I went for master classes in the summer to the Mozarteum, the Salisburgo in Salzburg, to further my training as a singer. And it came to a point of time where actually my law firm made the decision for me, because they were quite I think they were quite concerned that I was spending a lot of time devoting myself to music, where I should be devoting most of my life to my
To
career
your law
and to
practice,
build my law
right?
career.
Hmm.
And one there was one. So after the year end, I didn't receive a bonus, and my law firm spoke to me, and they were quite concerned about me pursuing music, and it came to a point of time that I had to make a decision. So I decided to quit, to resign from my law job, and I made the decision to go to Italy to study music. But I mean, I have to qualify this because it was originally um, going to be a 1 year thing. So I will go there, learn the language, maybe take a few private lessons, and then come back to Singapore and resume my law career. But in the end, 1 year became 12 years, and I stayed there for 12 years,
That
and
is
I became a
almost a
professional opera
lifetime.
singer.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that decision to leave law was a big decision, but it almost sounds like it was an easy one because the passion was clear where it really lied. And so I'm glad you did because you have a beautiful voice. Let's hear you sing Si può from I Pagliacci.
E poi io Tosca e le nostre nave le campane di strioni le nostre anime considerate poi che sia mobili di carne ed ossa e questor vana banda al mare levare sveglia
Let's talk about your repertoire and how you evolved in those 12 years. It is not standard for a lot of musicians once they leave the country, they leave Asia, they stay in the Western world, right? And so the
yeah.
decision to come back is actually somewhat unusual.
Okay, yeah. Well, so let me talk about my repertoire. So,
Yes.
when I was in the when I was in the conservatory, I was singing as a bass, but there was always a concern that my voice was not dark enough. But towards the end of my conservatorial, I met another teacher who became a very important person in my vocal development, and he was a baritone. And when he heard me, he said that you're not singing the right repertoire, and I don't think you're a bass baritone. I think you're a lyric baritone, but a lyric baritone that had a certain dark hue, and which was suitable to sing perhaps more serious roles like the Verdi repertoire.
Mm.
So we started doing the late Donizetti. We started doing the early Verdi to start, and that sort of like became the stuff that was offered to me. So I started singing Silvio. Then I went on to sing uh, uh, Germon. I sang Escamillo, and and I and the voice is developing in this direction.
It is not standard for a lot of musicians once they leave the country, they leave Asia, they stay in the Western world, right? And so the
Yeah.
decision to come back is actually somewhat unusual.
I felt that I was being needed more in Asia than in Europe. That was why I made the decision. And the decision I think is the correct one, because
Mhm.
as much as you think that there is a much more unsophisticated market in Asia, but actually it is again in Singapore, as I started to take on the role as a teacher and I started to take on the role as a producer, I realized that there's a lot more room for development and exploration, because the market is still young. So there are a lot of things that you can experiment with. You can try different formats, you can try different versions, different kinds of alternative staging. And I think this makes the whole experience a lot more refreshing. I started this new initiative called Lyrical Arts, which is an opera society, and it basically came out of a desire to address a certain kind of void in what's happening in my country, which is Singapore. So since the pandemic started, theaters have closed, and even then, even so, when theaters have sort of reopened, the government has imposed a lot of restrictions. A lot of the big theater companies and big opera companies are unable to actually push out their big productions because of these restrictions, because they have huge choruses, they have many singers, they have lots of wind instruments, they have a huge orchestra, and due to these restrictions, they are unable to push on with their season. And I thought that, but even as the pandemic goes on, there is still a huge desire to be back into the theater for the by the audience, by the theater goes to watch a live show, to watch a live performance. We all know the effect of what arts can do to us. You know, we people need the theater, and so lyrical arts came out as a kind of like initiative to address this thing, and it's a small society, and we hope to actually produce this bite-sized productions that can sort of like digestible, yes, to have this continuity of shows for Singapore, the Singapore audience. And the name Lyrica Arts, because Lyrica comes from Lyrica being the Italian word for opera, because there's Lyrica and there's opera. So I thought that I bringing my own background of having lived in Italy for 12 years and having studied the Italian school of singing, studied the repertoire, studying the culture, to bring to Singapore the knowledge and that and the things that I've learned, that I've acquired back in Italy, and to present it to Singapore, to present lots of the great Italian works, lots of the gems of Italian music that it's still unknown in Singapore.
This type of vocal music, to me personally, is the ultimate expression of passion. It is when your emotions bubble up to the surface to the point where you cannot contain it yourself, you literally burst into a song. When the human voice is trained to produce in this way, it is a lot of humanity in every single note. I love what you're doing. I love the fact that you are sharing something that you're passionate about, happens to be the same passion I have, with an audience that's new. Because I think that's sometimes missing, is that introduction and the willingness to hold their hands a little bit. So now let's talk about why you're in Taiwan and why you're locked up in a hotel room.
So I'm here in Taipei, but actually I'm here to do a show in Taichung
Right.
because we have a production, the Barber of Seville, Rossini's Barber of Seville, which is a production brought in by the National Taichung Theatre from the Royal Danish Theatre on the 22nd, 24th, and 26th of December. So I have to do my 14+7 quarantine here in Taipei, and then after 21 days, I will be able to take part in the rehearsals, and that will lead to the show.
Now you mentioned this is a Danish production, but with a cast of Asian singers. Would you be able to elaborate on how that is put together?
Yes. So the trend is that and I think it's a trend noticeable especially for the opera companies in Asia during the pandemic, is that due to the pandemic, it's become more difficult to bring in singers from overseas because of the restrictions. And so opera companies start to look into the possibilities of doing operas that can be casted locally. And it proves the point that that we that Asian companies, Asian opera companies, or Asian musical institutions like the Kaohsiung Wei can produce operas, and it can be successful even if it's an Asian cast. I mean, there's another issue which is very close to my heart, is because we are ultimately singing something which is not part of our Asian identity. It's something Western, it's something European, and yet we are bringing it here to Asia, and we're actually putting up performances, and we're actually inviting the local people to come in and watch our productions. So I think one of the issues as a producer is how to make Western opera relevant in the Asian society. And this is something which a lot of opera companies in Singapore as well has been trying to figure out, as into we sing Western opera, but we have to produce it in a way, we have to present it in a way that it is relevant to Asian people. Otherwise, how are we going to invite Asian people to come to the theater to watch something which is Western and anachronistic and that happened in the 17th or in the 16th century, and nobody really cares what's going on at that time.
Right.
But the music is still relevant, the issues are still relevant, and
Very
that's our job here as a producer, to make it relevant to society, because everybody loves the music, but we go into the theater because we want to be challenged, we want to see something relevant to society, and I think this is something which is the direction that most of us are taking, and it's the direction that I like.
I love what you're doing with your organization that you're building right now, and all the participation sounds like it's so close to your heart. I'm so grateful for Martin Ng to join us today. And now let's listen to more of his singing. Nick Shadow's aria, A Youth, a Painting Slave, from Stravinsky's opera, The Rakes' Progress. And please don't forget to subscribe, to like, and get notifications for the next episode. Now let's listen to this.
I was never singer. Come, master, observe the host of mankind. How are they? Wretched. Why? Because they are not free. Why? Because the giddy multitude are driven by the unpredictable mass of their pleasures, and the sober few are bound by the inflexible odds of their duty, between which laveries there is nothing to choose. Would you be happy? Then learn to act freely. Would you act freely? Then learn to ignore those twin tyrants of appetite and conscience. Therefore, I counsel you, master, take Barbara Turk to wife. Consider her picture once more, and as you do so, reflect upon my words. In youth the panting slave pursues the fair evasive dame. There caught in colder fetters woes, wealth, office, or a name, till all dishonored, sick, downcast, and failing in his wits, in virtue's narrow cell at last the withered bondsman sits. That man alone his fate fulfills, for he alone is free, who chooses what to will, and wills his choices decided. No eye his future can foretell, no law his past explain. Neither passion may compel, nor reason can restrain.